Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, Episode 79.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Century Eastern Wonders, Dragoon, Carcassonne the City, and DropMix, which we're putting on tap. We look back at near and far now that our campaign is complete. We talk about gluten-free beers, and we asked our Slack channel what classic games they feel don't get enough love. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
How about by exploring the wide range of possibilities for a great mix?
What is Jason Derulo?
Well, we learned out that and several other things when we played DropMix, which is our on-tap game today. And I really feel like we've got a really wide mix of games that we're talking about this particular episode, which is interesting. But hey, if this is your very first episode, thank you so much for joining us here at Draft Mechanic. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net and at Draft Mechanic on your social media of choice, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those good things.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. We will have a thread up for this episode and every episode. So if you want to swing by and let us know your 2 cents on what we're talking about this episode, that would be the place to do it.
Mm-hmm. And a shout out to our new Board Game Geek Micro Badger, Mike Van de Castile, the latest to pick up the Draft Mechanic Board Game Geek Micro Badge. I'm going to call them Micro Badgers from now on because it sounds hilarious, and I think
tiny
it's
badgers.
tiny badgers. But yeah, you can go grab that Micro Badge. There's a thread up on the Guild. If you need the Geek Gold to make it happen, we can make it happen for you. We just got this thing, and it's really cool, and I'm very excited about having that new thing. We are also a member of Punchboard Media, the board game media content network of video, written, and audio podcasts, and all that good content. You can go to punchboardmedia.com to check out the wide range of contributors right there.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly game nights. Our next one is going to be on July 17th at Salud Cerveceria. So if you want to come out around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, something like that. Actually, it'll probably be 6 because I know you're going to be out of town, so I will not get there till 6 because work. They have great drinks. They have non-alcoholic, alcoholic, good beer. If you're a beer fan, which if you're listening to us, I assume you are, great space to play games. We would love to see you there.
And if you're from somewhere in the regional area, we also have a big event coming up on Sunday, August 12th from 12 to 7 p.m. We are hosting a great big board game day at Good Road Cider Works. We're just going to have a big old blowout. We're missing that particular first Thursday of the month because we're going to be up at Gen Con. So we said, what better time to do an awesome thing, an awesome event, than right after Gen Con? Have some new hotness, maybe do some giveaways, and come on out to there. You can obviously go to our Facebook page and RSVP on that. It would be really good, actually, if you are planning on coming, to do that, because then I have a vague idea of how many people are coming, and I can plan accordingly with how much games we bring. How much games? A lot.
We just got another giveaway prize from Bellwether Games this week, so we are looking forward to giving out some really neat prizes and seeing a bunch of people and having a great day on Saturday the 12th of August.
For those of you Draft Mechanic listeners who are around in early April, perhaps the 1st of April, you might have remembered a certain special side project that I did with Aaron from Boards Alive and also Alex from the Dukes of Dice, where we kind of did a little board gaming spoof on one of our favorite brotherly advice podcasts. And I have to tell you that a thing has happened again, and myself and Danielle have been on Boards Alive this last week, episode 102, for a segment they called Cool Board Games Inc. This is the second time they've done it, but the first time we've been on as a guest, and oh boy, howdy did we have a fun.
Yeah, it was a great time to hang out with those guys and come up with really interesting new board games that one of which we're obviously going to be bringing to Kickstarter.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, we're not.
But I highly encourage you to go check that out over on the Boards Alive podcast feed or episode 102. You can go to boardsalivepodcast.com to check that out as well. It is so much fun to do something kind of wacky and off the wall like that, and I really hope that y'all enjoy that. And if you're coming over here for some reason because you heard us over there, we do not have rights to any of those games on this particular podcast. We will not legally be allowed to mention any of them.
Aaron was very clear about that.
A really hard bargain. And one final bit of housekeeping. This is something we've been kind of looking forward to for a long time, but not really done it, and we just kind of decided this is finally the time to release a Draft Mechanic shirt onto the wild. By the wild, I mean, I guess, y'all, the listeners out there that aren't in this studio lounge with the studio cat.
Yeah, I was going to say there is 1/3 of the occupants of this room being an animal, so a non-human animal. So
He's not
I think
very
it's pretty
wild.
wild in here.
He's pretty chill though. Anyway, if you were looking to get a Draft Mechanic t-shirt, which just has our logo in very bright, bold text, you can go to our website. We'll have a link up there. We will also have it in the show notes. We will have it on the Board Game Geek Guild thread. And if you want to just hear the words right now, I will tell you www.redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic. Ta-da! That's it. And if you want to see it, it's on the Instagram. I actually posted a picture of myself wearing the very first one of them. I got a V-neck. It looks very cool. And if you order this week, you'll probably have it by Gen Con. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I know that our last order delivered in a week. So if you want to show off some Draft Mechanic pride to Gen Con and you are going, you can order it right now, I guess, and go do that thing.
I'm really excited about the amount of options that Redbubble has for stuff. You're not just looking at, a regular standard crew neck t-shirt. If you want a different style, they have so many styles and colors available.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to be Draft Mechanic branded because that's what we got up there. So you can show off in the most comfortable way for you.
So once again, you can check that out on redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic. We would really appreciate it. Anybody out there who wants to show off the shirt and show off the logo, high five to you all out there. Thank
I'm
you.
sure at some point we'll get a link from our website as well so that you can just click right through from there.
Yes. So, moving on to games news, things that are actually about board games. Very first one, I want to talk about a new game announcement, Azul, Stained Glass of Sintra. This is a sequel, but it's stained glass instead of floor tiles. Oh, and there's not really a whole lot of blue in it, so it makes me kind of wonder why it is still called Azul. And I guess it is probably because Azul has sold over 300,000 copies, and it's a Spiel des Jahres nominee, and that makes a whole lot of sense to make a sequel game have that Azul branding as well.
Obviously.
Also, this kind of flies in the face of the Next Move Games thing, where they're only going to have games that have a four-letter title. They had Azul, and then they had Reef, and now they have Azul Stained Glass of Sintra.
Is that like a real thing?
That is a real thing. That was one of the tenets of their company. Their mission statement has a whole bunch of bolded four-letter words talking about how their games are, and this one has 4 letters and then 4 more words.
I mean, it's the Azul brand, is what
Yeah.
I'm guessing they're going with.
It's in the Azul family of products. But, I don't know, the game looks very pretty, unsurprisingly. Next Move Games has shown off that they are very good at component quality, and I'm excited to see how the game plays. Obviously, we were big fans of Azul, and that's really all I know about it so far, other than it is that, and it's going to probably make them a lot of money.
I don't know. The one thing that I'm kind of hesitant about is we already have Sagrada, and we have pre-ordered the 5 and 6 player expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So the Azul stained glass version is going to have to do something quite different, because I know it's also a drafting game, correct?
Yeah,
like Azul?
It has the same kind of setup where you have the market circle tiles in the center, and you're going to be drafting stained glass tiles out of that center area. But from what I have gleaned from the limited information available, they're also double-sided, and you're going to be laying them out onto your personal board in a different way than Azul, and definitely different than Sagrada, which I don't really understand why people compare Azul and Sagrada, other than the fact that they're both pretty games that have squares, I guess. And you
Well,
build
I
a
mean,
thing.
this one is about stained glass, which is why I'm drawing the
Yeah.
comparison. But we already have Azul and Sagrada, so I'm kind of curious what this is going to do differently that's going to make it necessary when we already own those 2 games, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I am interested in a way to see if we can continue to have more games that have a stained glass theme, because at least it is not just more farmers staring dourly into the distance. That's always a
Dour
good thing.
Farmers is my favorite.
And if, stained glass windows is the new Farmers in the Mediterranean, I don't think anybody's going to complain, because it's something new and exciting. Let's hope that the games are new and exciting as well.
We shall have to see.
Another one on the horizon, we have a big expansion on the way for A Feast for Odin, which was one of our games we reviewed early 2017. Very big, heavy, and also complex Uwe Rosenberg game in which you have tons and tons of pieces, and you are laying them out in tiny, tiny Tetramino-style patterns on your thing, and then doing the worker placement with 500 billion different worker placement options.
60.
60, but it's a lot. But anyway, the new expansion, The Norwegians, has 4 new islands, a new mountain strip, more components, more action spaces, and apparently a variable starting setup for players. This is coming out at Essen of this year. Danielle, do you feel we need more things going on in A Feast for Odin?
I'm probably not the person to ask, because I'm not really of the opinion that there was too much in the original version of Feast for Odin.
Okay.
I know a lot of times people talk about there being 60 action spaces, and that this was so much and it was crazy and you really didn't know what to do when you were taking your turn. I don't feel that way. They were grouped in a way that made them make sense, so you really only had maybe 10 or so different types of actions that you were taking. So I feel like this is not going to be super unwieldy. It's not like you're adding new action spaces to 60 different things. You're adding new action spaces to, a certain number of groups of different things, and this is probably going to add another group or two of action spaces. Right. So I'm excited to see what they might be. I'm also excited to see that variable starting setup.
Yeah, that's the thing that's the most exciting to me as well, because I feel like we have played Feast for Odin enough times that we know kind of what your starting moves are going to be, the first few actions you might take depending on what player you are in order. And having a variable setup there where you have maybe some different houses or some different buildings already built on your particular land board would be interesting and at least give you a fresh start that you have to come up with a new strategy from the very beginning.
It's a heck of a Euro expansion name, though.
Yeah. The Norwegians.
Obviously.
In other non-directly game news, the Gen Con Geek Preview on Board Game Geek, the list is up to 404 titles as of time of recording. Last year's Gen Con list, I went back and I looked at this, I was way off last time. I did not approach 1,000 titles. It was at 573 titles. And the Essen list was 1,046 titles. Now, fair, the Gen Con Geek Preview last year was the very first Geek Preview, so maybe they just didn't have everything built in there as quickly as they wanted this year. But at 404 titles with 2.5 weeks to go, I'm predicting probably 600 to 650 total. What do you think?
Just shy of 500.
Okay, so you don't think it's going to break 500?
I don't think so, because, there are some major publishers that don't really get their stuff on the preview list, at least not before Gen Con, and I don't know if they update it after that, but we won't see a lot of the Fantasy Flight stuff on there at all, because they don't announce until at Gen Con. I have a feeling that there are still some major publishers that aren't on that list that I haven't seen stuff because I've gone through and rated everything as to whether I'm interested or not. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to be as big as last year, because last year was sort of Gen Con 50, and I feel like a lot of people tried to really push a bunch of stuff out. Mm-hmm. The other thing that sort of makes these numbers a little misleading is that not everything on the Gen Con preview is coming out at Gen Con. Sure. A lot of publishers have games that are 2-3 years old that they are bringing and that they'd love to sell a bunch of copies of that are on the preview that they are just bringing to sell that aren't a release or a demo or a preview of any kind. There's also stuff that is just demos that is not coming out for another couple of years. So we'll have to see how much new stuff is coming out, but I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit less than last year.
Okay. So you say under 500, I say above 600. I feel like that is a fair bet, and we will digitally shake over that.
I bet we're both wrong.
Yes, it'll be 550 exactly, and none of us will win any points in this game we're playing now. One final interesting bit of statistical note. The Board Game Geek library, their online catalog of games, is approaching 100,000 entries. So over 100,000 board games listed as individual games or expansions or stuff like that on Board Game Geek. It's currently at 99,770. That means I think they're pretty much on pace to break that 100,000 before Gen Con of this year. It seems like 10 to 50 or so games are being added every day to that catalog. And I don't really know if there's anything particularly we need to comment on this, other than it's a really cool big round number, and that always kind of seems to draw attention.
Yeah, but if you're messing around with the random game button earlier as any indication, a lot of those games are not worth looking at.
Very, very true. Well, hopefully the new games that are being added to the Board Game Geek catalog are exciting and have cool and interesting mechanics and great themes. More stained glass windows, perhaps?
Well, as a very wise person once said, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and then you get the games of Board Game Geek.
That's the facts. All right, time to move on to Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general. I want to change the name of the segment. Let's workshop it. Should this be called the Fermenter? Is this games fermenting? The brewing?
No.
Here's some games that are crowdfunding, and we're going to talk about
Kickstarter, yes.
All right, so quick project updates. Coldwater Crown, the Sea expansion from Bellwether Games, we talked about 2 episodes ago, is finishing up this Wednesday, July 18th. It's a $24,000 out of the $7,000 goal. Continuing to roll along. Please go check that out. We are big fans of Coldwater Crown, and I'm super excited to see the Sea get as much stretch goal goodness as it possibly can. It's about to hit that 48-hour push, so hopefully some people jump on and get the base game and get the expansion and get it all together and just drive their little boats around, little boat standees, boats.
So Long My World, which we talked about last episode from Axis Mundi, ended at $128,000 of its $10,000 goal. They unlocked over 60 stretch goals.
Not a typo.
Yeah, that definitely looks like it would have been. That absolutely just exploded. Let's hope that it goes okay from here, because when you're talking about that many extra stretch goals, there can be production issues.
Yeah, they added on 3 additional expansions that you can add on as more fun stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, and their pledge manager goes up in a little bit, so who knows what else they're going to be adding on. All this more crazy additional content. And then third, Rec Raiders from Kids Table Board Games, funding currently at 347%. It's $26,000 of its $8,000 goal. This one ends on Thursday, July 19th, so you got a few days left. They've unlocked 7 stretch goals, including components for a 5th player, so you can bring it to more family goodness times. So in terms of new stuff, I've got 4 different projects for you, only one of which is the traditional Kickstarter for one board game, and I'm going to talk about that one first. So we have SPQF from Hyperbole Games. It is launching today, July 16th, so sometime today. You can go check this out. I don't know the exact time. It's $49 to back this game. Shipping is included in the United States. There will not be international shipping due to the heavy shipping costs and the fact that Hyperbole Games, Grant Rodiak, is doing all of this himself. Grant Rodiak is the designer of this game. He's obviously known for Cry Havoc and also some other smaller games, Farmageddon, Hocus, and some stuff that he has been releasing himself under the Hyperbole Games moniker. Now, this is a really unique-looking Civilization deck-building game. In addition to the kind of things you see in Civ building games where you have like follow actions where you get to follow along what somebody else did if you have a card to play, or enhancing cards that you play with other cards out of your hand, and different paths to victory, all these things you expect in a Civilization game, there's an interesting mechanic in the way that you're doing the deck building, where you're taking a card either out of the main trade row, or any cards that you don't use at the end of your turn out of the ones you drew goes into a trade row in front of you that also becomes accessible to other players when they are taking cards to build their particular deck on that turn. This is such a cool looking mechanic, and I feel like it really thematically simulates people moving between civilizations, just travel and emigration and concepts like that. And it's just really an interesting idea that I haven't really seen in a deck builder before, so I'm excited to see how this one goes. This is, like I said, self-published, and Grant Rodiak is doing some really nice laser woodcut pieces. You have these woodcut acorns for the point tokens, and you have a woodcut player board, and the art is really cute as well. If you're wondering about the name there, SPQF is a riff on an old Roman initialism. There we go. Senatus Populesque Romanus, which is of the Senate and the people of Rome. But this one, he replaces the R with an F for SPQF, and that is what that means.
What does the F stand for?
Forest.
Oh, of course.
The Senate and people of the forest. So yes, this is going up on Kickstarter today. I really, really encourage you to check this one out. Grant Rodiak is not going to be able to really publish this one to retail or anything, so this is one of the kind of projects that you look at as a game for Kickstarter that really can only exist because of Kickstarter. I'm excited to see it, so go check that out. I know that he's got a lot of preview content going up as well from, I think Eric at What's Eric's Playing is one of the Punchboard Media members that has a preview of that'll be going up tomorrow as well.
And Grant Rodiak's done a bunch of Kickstarters before, so I'm not worried about his ability to fulfill this one because he's got lots of experience working with Kickstarter and shipping within his means and everything like that. I think that's why we're seeing this lack of international shipping. He doesn't want to overextend himself and get into the kind of trouble that some Kickstarters can.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. He knows exactly what to watch out for, so good luck to you, Grant. I hope this one goes well. That's SPQF. Next up, we have an interesting project that is simply titled 14 Board Games from Africa. This is on Indiegogo, and this is going to be coming to us from Kenechukwu Obuwagwu. Now, this project is a Nigerian board game designer and his group of game designers who are looking for funding to both bring his country's games to the world and also fund the opening of Nigeria's first tabletop board game cafe. The games that are available through the campaign are a wide range of big, medium, and small size games. There's area control games, racing games, card games, and even like a tabletop soccer game. But the Games Cafe is the big goal for this project funding, and it seems like they have a good business plan to get it going. They understand the expenses that they need to make this thing happen, but they really, really need the funding. I really think it's worth checking out, and remember, it's on Indiegogo, not Kickstarter. Obviously, we'll put a link up in the show notes about this.
They've also got some educational games that you can pledge for, and I like the way that they're doing the funding tiers on this campaign. It's not like you pledge for a specific game and each game has a different cost. you pledge for a combination of different sizes of game, and then in the campaign, they have a brief overview of each of the 14 games that is mentioned in the title, and you can mix and match them however you want. So if you like or don't like a particular style of game, you don't have to get one if it doesn't sound like it's right up your alley, because there's 14 different ones. You can pick the mix and match combination that you think best suits what you are going to play with your group.
Yeah, I think this is a really awesome project, and it's the kind of campaign that we always hope to see, where people are bringing board gaming to new markets, new cultures, new parts of the world. This has about 18 days as of the day of release of this episode, and I really hope it starts to pick up some traction and get some funding and get more notice and more people talking about it. It's a great project for a great cause, and I really just dig it. I think it's awesome.
Agreed. That is 14 board games from Africa, and we will have the link in our Kickstarter section of the show notes.
So moving on, I have two projects that are not board games at all, but they are kind of board game world related. First, Casual Game Insider Magazine is seeking funding for their 7th year of publication. Now, this is a quarterly board game industry magazine focusing on casual games. It also has some kind of longer form articles. For example, the most recent one I was looking at had an article about co-op games and how they fit for certain kinds of groups, and there was an article on color blindness and how that affects different people playing different kinds of games. This is a magazine that is released quarterly. It's currently funded at 333% of their goal. That's $33,000 out of $10,000. This ends on Tuesday, July 24th. You can get a 1 year's digital subscription of 4 issues for $10, and you can add on the print for $20. You get the print and the digital for 1 year. And if you want to, you can get a lifetime digital subscription for $40. There's also a few other tiers that allow you to get the back catalog of the 7 years that they've been doing this. You can just get those PDFs as well, and all sorts of other different options there. But this is their 7th year in publication. It's pretty darn awesome, and they're doing seems like they're really rolling with this thing.
I do find it kind of funny that if you're into casual games, but so into casual games that you would like a magazine about it. So that's a little bit of a paradox right there, but it does seem like a really interesting magazine, and those articles that you were talking about are a slightly more in-depth topic than I was expecting from the name of the magazine.
Yeah.
So that would be neat, especially with Counter Magazine just ending their run. If you are still looking to get a magazine or something quarterly where articles are compiled, this would be a neat way to do it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to take a look at this. I'm hopping on to get some this PDF goodness in my email box as well. That is Casual Game Insider, and is running through Tuesday, July 24th. All right, finally. I have one final little campaign that I have to tell everybody about. It is Tiny Dice Buddies Enamel Pins. This is coming from Laura Hammonds at Double Feature. It is funded at 143% right now, $2,000 out of the $1,500 goal. This is ending on Wednesday, August 1st. It is a set of adorably cute pins of all your favorite dice making cute faces. I think they're freaking adorable. For $20, you can get a set of a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20, and a percentage die, which is also, I guess, another D10, but he has a different face, and it's very funny. So there's more color options that will be unlocked as stretch goals go. The first set is pastels, the next ones will be primaries, and after that is like a bold set as well.
Neutrals,
Neutrals, there you go.
But you do have many color options in each of those groups, so there's not just one pastel set. You get a whole bunch of different sets that you can pick from.
They look super cool. I'm so excited.
They are adorable, and if you had seen the alignment pins that she had done previously, these are going to be the same sort of style and quality as those. They're very cute. If you need some pins to put on your bag or on your t-shirt or whatever, these are a neat one to check out.
Yes, and I am unfortunately becoming addicted to tiny, adorable pins. So here we are with Tiny Dice Buddies Enamel Pins. Go check it out. Yeah. All right. Time to move on to the games proper.
The ones we've actually played.
Here it comes. Here comes the bump music. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com.
The first game we want to talk about is actually a pretty big new announcement game. This is Century Eastern Wonders that just recently hit shelves from Plan B Games. This is a 2018 release, as I just said, that plays 2 to 4 players in 30 to 45 minutes. The designer, as with the other Century game, was Emerson Matsuuchi, and the artist is Chris Quilliams. This is a game of converting cubes into other cubes to fulfill orders, but this time with boats.
Boats! Boats make every game better, right?
They do!
We've been a big fan of boats here in the past.
Except legacy games.
Except that one. Moving on. So if you have played Century Spice Road or Century Golem Edition, which is the exact same game with different art that they've released a few months later after telling us that they wouldn't, but then they did anyway to make a lot of people buy the game again.
Moving on.
You will know the basic mechanic of Century Eastern Wonders, in which you have 4 different colors of cubes, and you're using cards to convert those cubes from one type of cube to another type of cube. Nominally, you are trading spices, or in this one, you are trading different spices
Of the same 4 colors.
the same 4 colors, but they're different spices now. That's what matters. And you are doing this to get the right set of cubes so you can go and fulfill an order. In Century Spice Road, this was all done with a set of cards. You had cards in your hand that either got you cubes or converted cubes into other cubes. And once you had the right set of cubes, you could spend those cubes to fulfill an order card in the tableau in front of everybody. Once somebody had collected, I think it's 5 of the order cards, that would be the end of the game. Count up points. Most points wins. What a surprise. But Century Eastern Wonders adds a map and boat element onto this. You have a set of tiles in front of you that represent different islands, and each of the islands is able to convert cube set A into cube set B. And also, the orders, instead of being cards you could grab from anywhere, you had to go to specific ports in order to trade in your cubes for that order tile and score points. In Century Eastern Wonders, it's also complicated by the fact that you have to build colonies on each of these converter islands in order to take advantage of that island. If you're the first person to get there, it's free, but as more and more people establish colony spaces or colonies onto these spaces, you have to pay an additional good per piece of wood that's already on that particular space. Also, if you want to move further to get to a special island that has the right kind of converter you need, you have to spend additional goods cubes out of your warehouse to move more than one space. And there are some bonus tiles that will, impact the way that you convert or the way that you move, but nominally, you're going to be moving around the board, converting your cubes, and then going off to the ports in order to get the points tiles. And then, once again, the person with the most points is going to be the winner.
Now, I think one of the interesting differences between the 2 games is that everybody has access to the same conversion tiles in Eastern Wonders, as opposed to in Spice Road or Golem Edition, where you drew a card and you took that conversion card into your hand, and that meant other people didn't have access to it. Here, it's just a matter of which ones you choose to build your buildings on. And it looked like, I didn't get to play this with you, but it looked like the order in which you did that also affected the bonuses that you got. If you built a certain type of huts, on specific types of islands, you would get to take one of the bonus tiles, it looked like?
Yeah, so each one of the islands has a specific goods type associated with it, and you must build the outpost from that row, whatever, goods row that is on your board, onto that. And once you've cleared out, I think, one of each of the 4 different kinds of goods, then you get to take your first bonus tile, and then after the second set, second bonus tile, so on and so forth. All the bonus tiles are worth points as well, and they do, give you some kind of a manipulation ability, and people did continually choose different tiles, so it's not like we were all playing the same game. I don't know how I feel about Eastern Wonders, and I also have to kind of give it the perspective that I had after playing Century Spice Road. After playing the first game of Century Spice Road, I remember feeling, oh wow, this is really interesting, and this is a really snappy, exciting conversion kind of game. But play 2, 3, 4, and 5 of Century Spice Road, it continued to be exactly the same game every time, and it kind of lost its luster quickly, which is odd because, the game it's most often compared to, Splendor, is really exactly the same in terms of how much variability you can get out of it. But I guess it's also telling that I'm not a huge fan of Splendor. I guess I just want more meat out of my engine building, and this is the simplest kind of engine building you can do. And then you take Century Eastern Wonders that adds in things that sound awesome. You've got this map movement, you've got the ability to establish colonies and get bonus tiles, and also you're working around the other players because if you land where somebody else is, you have to give them a cube as well. But something about it just kind of felt cluttered, and I don't know if that was just the physical way it was built. Near the end of the game, we were playing a 4-player game, which is the full amount of players. It honestly became kind of hard to see what was going on where, because you have so many tiny little wooden pieces on all of these island tiles, and the island tiles can't be more than 3 inches across, if that. So by the end of the game, it got to be kind of hard to know what in the world I was doing, and I also kind of, in a way, felt like I wasn't excited by the game. I wasn't excited by the way that the game works, and I often talk about, and you'll hear me talk about this in other games, I lost it every time, but I still have a great time playing. It's so much fun to play that I don't care if I win or lose. This is not a brag, but I won this game very easily, and I didn't enjoy it. And I feel like that's kind of a weird place to be, that I got the game and I thought it was mechanically satisfying and I enjoyed the way the pieces fit together, but I prolonged the game at one point. I made a, not so great decision just because I wanted to see how this would play out.
We call that an error.
No, it was an intentional error. It was an intentional choice that wasn't to my advantage because I wanted to see if it would produce something interesting.
Sure.
I was well ahead and I stayed well ahead, so this sounds dumb. But yeah, I extended the game because I wanted to see if there was something exciting that would happen there, and it didn't really. The pieces work, and if you like engine building and you enjoyed Century Spice Road and you're looking for something that's got a little bit more complexity to it, this might be a good game for you. But for me, it's not really that exciting, and I feel kind of bummed out about that because it looked like it was going to be great for me.
Well, I'll have to check it out at some point, see if I concur with you. I also wasn't crazy about Spice Road, but this did look like it added some interesting decisions that I'm curious to see how it changes the gameplay. So
yeah. I am interested also, I want to try at some point the game where you mix the two together. You can do Century from Sand to Sea, where you combine parts of Spice Road and parts of Eastern Wonders and make everything more complex, and you have to deal with having cards in your hands and going around to places on the ocean. But I was watching a review of it, and I looked at it, and the reviewers were talking, oh, this is such a great thing, look at all these things you have to do, and all this balancing and such, it's so exciting. And I looked at it, and just like, but that doesn't look like it would be any fun to have to worry about all those things at the same time. If you're going to give me an engine builder with complexity, don't make it forced by putting together two games that have a different way of playing. I don't know. This is me pontificating about a game that I have not yet played based on my experience with the two games it is parts of. But, I guess that's my pipe bomb for this particular episode.
that is a lukewarm review of Century Eastern Wonders.
All right, Danielle, you had a chance while I was playing that to play Dragoon, the 2016 release from Lay Waste Games. 2 to 4 players, 30 to 60 minutes. This is designed by Jake and Zach Given, with art by Nick Nazaro. This is a game of area-controlled dice rolling, cloth and metal, and other materials not often found in board games.
Well, I will say that we were playing the 2016 edition, which did have those metal pieces. I say that because the 4th edition, which is in the process of coming out, if you look on the threads of BGG, there is a whole lot of angst about the fact that this Kickstarter is quite delayed. But that edition that is coming out now is actually going to have plastic pieces instead of the metal pieces that I played with to bring the cost way down. But also, the metal pieces were kind of the coolest part of the game, so that's a little bit of a bummer. That being said, that's what I played with, and I will say that the metal pieces were really cool. If you can find a copy of it, they are very cool, sort of minimalist, angular dragons and caves and little forts. The board is a rolled-out piece of cloth that has very cool artwork on it, so the components in this game were absolutely great. But let me tell you about how you play the game. Mm-hmm. You are a dragon, and you start with your keep on the board. Everybody starts with their little dragon cave on the board. And towns and cities are going to come out at the beginning of every turn. You're going to roll dice and place towns out onto a grid system like you would a map based on what you roll on the dice. And if you place a town on one that is already existent, it's going to become a city, which is worth more points if you control it. Once you have placed out towns equal to the number of players plus 1, you are going to take a bunch of actions. Everybody gets 3 action points per round, and you can use that to either move around, to control a city if you are on it, to destroy a city if you'd like. If you're on it, you can destroy a city for immediate points, or to challenge another dragon. You can also play cards, which don't require any of your action points, but will allow you to have special one-time abilities like card actions normally do. Or if you want to spend 2 of your action points, you can draw more cards, because those are very powerful. If you happen to claim a city, which is one of those things I mentioned you can do with one of your action points, at the end of the action phase, you are going to roll a die for each of the cities you control, and they are going to give you gold based on a scale that is on your little player aid card. I will say the player aid cards were very helpful, giving you both the actions on one side and the sort of tithe rate on the other. If you roll a 1, you actually lose one of the cities you control, and if you roll a 6, you get 2 points for a town, and I think it's 4 points for a city, and between that there is a bunch of things where you get 1 and 2. You are going to get gold for that, and if you manage to get to 50 gold, you are going to be the winner. There is also a thief's treasure that moves around the board and is placed in the same way that the towns are, where it is rolled for if somebody ends their turn on the thief's treasure. And you can steal gold from the thief, providing he has any, because he is accruing gold throughout the game as everybody else is. You can steal gold from other players. If you go to their keep, you roll a die and you get that much gold from them and they'll go down and you'll go up. So it's very much trying to keep other players balanced as you go through, at the same time keeping control of your own towns and not having other people destroy them so that you can keep getting that money every turn from your towns. The game, like I said, looked absolutely gorgeous. The design on it is absolutely just phenomenal. And I think they're keeping the same art design in this new edition. They're just not keeping the components as metal, which is a shame because they are very cool metal components and very cool colors. Mm-hmm. The game I was kind of meh on. It was certainly a luck-based game because you are putting out those tiles randomly. So if you roll a bunch of tiles that are all in one section of the grid that's right around a player's keep, they're going to have an easier time moving to those tiles to control them. Since you pay an action point to move one space orthogonally, if there are things closer to you, it's just generally easier for you to get to them. There is also a little bit of luck in how well you roll to get that money at the end of the turn, to get your payment from your cities. If you roll particularly well, then you're just going to get more money for having the same amount of stuff. I will say that the dice were also made out of metal, and I'm not 100% sure they were properly balanced because they weren't actually cubic. They were sort of roughly hewn. So yeah. I'm not sure they bounced quite right. But I guess if everybody's using the same dice, that would even out. But it depends on what roll you're doing.
Yeah.
If you're rolling it to just place towns on the board, that matters less than if you're trying to get money from your cities at the end of the game, where you could be getting, or at the end of the turn, where you could be getting 4 gold. Like I said, whoever gets to 50 gold first is going to be the winner, and this game was fine. I think you really need to keep the other players in check in order to be able to play this game in any kind of competitive way. The players I was playing with are not the kind of players who are going to intentionally screw over another player, which means that I was kind of able to just walk away with having stuff and rolling well and lucking into getting a whole bunch of gold at the end of 2 or 3 different turns. So without other players coming and taking or destroying those cities, I was just able to keep raking that in. You need to play this in a little bit of a cutthroat way, which the way the weight of the game may not be the people that you would play this with. You may play this at a family gathering or whatever, and I'm not sure that's going to be people who are going to play competitively enough to keep a player in check. If it does sound like something that's fun, if you like a little bit of luck in your games like that, this is a fine game. It is certainly a pretty one.
Yeah. I love the production of this game, and we've seen it at Gen Con, I think probably the last 2 years. They always have a nice booth set up. I really, from watching you and, watching the game play, it really seems like it is one of those kind of games that needs to be played mean, and that's not really a thing that we're super into, but I know that it works well for some people, and that is definitely something you want to take into account on this game, it sounds like.
Certainly.
All right, well, that is Dragoon.
And now it is time that we return to
the CarcaZone.
This week we are talking about Carcassonne the Castle, which is a 2003 release from Rio Grande Games, which plays exactly 2 players in 30 minutes. The designers are Rainer Knizia and Klaus-Jürgen Werder. The artist is Christoph Tisch. This is a Carcassonne that is restrictive with boundaries, and it is exclusively for 2 players, and boy, howdy is it mean.
Did you like my little effect? I found a dial on the mixing board that I haven't played with yet.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The CarcaZone!
Of course.
Yes. Anyway, that's really fun. So, Carcassonne the Castle is a Carcassonne game specifically for 2, designed by Rainer Knizia. That is way out of the ordinary for Carcassonne so far. Carcassonne is just generally is this intro-level game that you are going to be able to get people in. You play a wide variety of players. Everyone that we've played so far has had a wide player count, 2 to 5 or 2 to 6, something like that. But this one is very restrictive. This is only a 2-player game. And as we talk about the game, you're probably going to start to understand why. So first up, Instead of your regular Carcassonne, where you start with a start tile and you build out from that, or if you have a central tile and you build out from that and make this big expanse, this one starts by you setting up a frame. And this is not a square frame. It's kind of a weirdly shaped. It's obviously, a lot of right angles because tiles and all. But the frame is going to dictate the amount of space you have to play in this particular game of Carcassonne. All of the tiles have your kind of standard Carcassonne setup in that you have features you're going to be watching out for, but this one is going to have the tiles set up a little differently. We have this typical thing where you have roads or paths that will meet at the center of tiles, but then you will also have castle keeps and houses. And instead of your typical Carcassonne where a feature takes up the whole side of a tile, you kind of need to think about this one in that the tiles are split up into quadrants, and each of the quadrant will either be field, or it will be castle, or it will be house, and, something might be like, oh, this one is 2 house and 1 castle and 1 field, and the houses are connected, or there's a path that walks between this particular castle and this particular field, but the same placement will kind of apply a little bit in that you must connect paths to paths. However, any other feature can butt up to any other feature. So you might have a field tile that is right next to a piece that has castle and house on it or something like that.
That's called a lawn.
I guess, yeah. But it's going to be very interesting because your features are going to continue to expand until they are completely walled off. Rather than placing a piece that is like the cap end on a city or something like that, you have to surround it by things that aren't of that particular type. This is going to also be kind of interesting in that the scoring in this particular game of Carcassonne, like normal Carcassonne, when you play a tile, you have a choice to put one of your meeples down on any of the features on that tile. Scoring will occur when you complete a feature, when that feature is surrounded on all sides by other terrain types. However, at the end of the game, you get no points if you have a meeple on an incomplete feature. Asterisk,
Except
we'll talk
for
about
lawns,
it later.
yeah.
So what this means is that throughout the whole game, you're constantly trying to build up your features, but also make sure that you can close them out so you can get points for them. Scoring points during the game is incredibly important because obviously points are what gets you the game, but also as you score points, you're going to be moving your score marker on this frame that you built at the beginning of the game, which is also the score track. It's the castle wall is the score track. And every time that score track takes a right angle turn, there is a small tile on there, and if you land on one of the 2 points spaces that are on that corner, you get this bonus tile. Some of those tiles allow you to score incomplete features at the end of the game. Some of them allow you to double score a particular feature. There's one that is just worth an extra 5 points. There's one that raises the point value of the markets that I'll talk about in a little bit at the end of the game. And then there's also another one that you can spend to take a second turn in a row, which for Carcassonne is pretty darn cool. This game also has a farmer, quote-unquote, kind of mechanic where you can place a meeple laying down in a field space, and you will score 3 points per market icon that is in that particular field, rather than butting up against, however many castles you're up against, or however many such and such. It's fields, or it's markets that are in that particular field area.
I think we saw something like that in Discovery, didn't we? Where when you put your farmer into the field, it was how many of the little different types of markets. In this one, they're all the same type, but it's still how many of the actual field tiles have the thing that you're looking for.
So obviously, at the end of the game, you're going to count up all of the points you have. You're going to score any remaining features, any bonus tiles you have, and whoever has the most points will be the winner of Carcassonne, the castle. So I want to start out by talking about art and presentation on this game, because if you look on the internet, it is a very common refrain that this game is ugly. I think it's...
I don't agree with that.
Well, I don't either. And I honestly feel like people are kind of memeified that this game is ugly as just like, oh, that's what we have to say when somebody says Carcassonne the Castle. Because while it's not the most luxurious print or art, like the most recent version of Carcassonne that's, well, super duper illustrated, I think it's pretty darn cute. And you see a lot of like little people running around and they all have little Easter eggs and it's fun in that way. And I
definitely thought
fine.
This was some of the better Carcassonne art design. Like there's a little guy on a hobby horse, and there's one guy, it looks like he's holding a Carcassonne tile. And,
there's a lot of cute stuff going on in there.
And I think the buildings themselves are really nice, and the buildings are clear to see. It's not phenomenal drawing. I mean, you're drawing roof tiles and a castle keep and lawn. It's not a very complicated art that you're drawing. The frame that is around the outside might be a little bit ugly, but it's just a brown frame. It's not the end of the world.
I honestly, looking at like early Carcassonne games, like they all looked really kind of the same, and this one looks different, and maybe that's why people don't like it, because it's not the same boring Carcassonne art. I don't know. But you did have actually one real big thing you wanted to talk about with the look of the game.
Yeah, I did have one component quibble, we'll say. Since these tiles are divided into quadrants, as opposed to regular Carcassonne tiles, which have a lot of diagonal lines on them to divide features, I had a lot of trouble deciding where the actual edges of a tile were and where it was just a crisscross in the center of a tile, because you have to play all of your tiles in the same grid, so they have to all line up tops of tiles and bottoms of tiles with everything else that's already on the board. And you do actually start playing tiles off specific start spaces on that frame, so it is set where you're going to be placing tiles. But a lot of times I'd go to place a tile and Jake would be like, that's actually 1/4 off of the actual grid we're working on, but you can't really tell because they are cut into quadrants, so it could very easily just look like one step up. So that's my one little component quibble with the game. Pay attention and you'll be fine, I guess.
I will say also that this is a game where you kind of are going to have to take care of your components more than your typical Carcassonne. The frame itself is made of 8 or 9 pieces that you have to kind of snap together with like a puzzle piece kind of snap, so that if you are not storing the game properly, you're bouncing it around, you're messing with the pieces a whole lot, you could realistically bend or break some of those, which would make this kind of a pain to play more than, oh no, we scuffed this side of this tile, or this tile got bent. If you lose some or damage some of that frame, that's going to be a big problem. And I think that is even more compounded by the fact that this game that was released in, 2003, is no longer available, not in print, and I was able to get a copy by trading on Board Game Geek, which is, I guess, my new game where I trade Carcassonnes on Board Game Geek. You also heard us say at the beginning that this was a boy howdy mean kind of Carcassonne, and I didn't really feel that until one of the later games we were playing, but I realized that if I prevented you from closing out your features, I could really, really wreck the strategy of you playing the game. And that was something that I started to do in that last game, and I said, oh man, I don't want to get into that fight right now.
I guess so. I mean, it's no more mean, in my opinion, than your traditional Carcassonne where you can go in and snipe somebody's field that they've been counting on at the very end of the game. And honestly, this felt less mean to me. I mean, obviously I said it was mean earlier, but I didn't write that note. I felt it was less mean than a lot of the different things that you could do in a regular Carcassonne, because you go and place pieces into this frame knowing exactly how much space there is to be had around it. It's not like a regular Carcassonne where somebody can build out and find a way to work around. You're never going to be able to be placing anything outside of this frame. So if you build a castle and you see that there's 3 spaces until the tiles that are already there, like, you have to get that finished off, otherwise you better have a plan. And there is a way to have a plan for that in this game. Some of those tiles that you can pick up from the frame when you're going around scoring points and getting those bonus tiles allow you to score features that are not completed at the end of the game. So while it was a little bit mean for you to be going like, oh, I can block you from finishing off this castle, I also went into that knowing that I had a tile that was going to allow me to score it anyway.
Right.
So you need to plan. I think the more frustrating part of this game wasn't other players being, or the other player, because there is only one, being mean. It was the dang roads. The roads were frustrating because normally, like, roads are great. You can just stick people on roads and they go forever. But because of this needing to line up the roads and wanting to finish things off, you could very quickly find yourself in a position where you needed to draw a tile that had a piece of road and you absolutely just couldn't, and that's what was preventing you from finishing off the feature, not the other player. Just the fact that you put something stupid with a road, or they put a road in a place where you had nothing that would fit there, or where the one tile that would fit there was already somewhere else in the grid.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. Honestly, there's 2 ways to screw over somebody else's feature. Either you start expanding it in weird ways that are hard to complete, because, like I said earlier, any tile can complete off a feature as long as, it can butt up against that. You can complete, just by surrounding a castle, you can, surround it with field or house or whatever. But if you place roads in such a way that it makes it harder for somebody to place a tile, any tile at all in that particular space, it becomes really frustrating, because the tiles with roads, I think we counted them, it was maybe like 60% of the tiles in the game have a road on them, which means that the ones without roads, that are really the golden tiles, the ones that you really want because they allow you to manipulate your features most effectively, those are in the minority, which means that you're constantly having to deal with paths and roads, which I guess is good city planning in that way because people need to walk around, but this is not a real city. This is a game you are playing with your opponent.
You can, however, run the road right into the wall if you want, which is very good because otherwise there would be no way to end the dang things.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm really loving about this Carcassonne game, Carcassonne the Castle, is something that I feel like I've talked about a number of times in the past. It gives you a restriction. We talked about this with Amazonas in the last episode, in that you have to follow the river, or Carcassonne the city, where the walls are going to be building up around you as the game progresses. But this one, you start out the game knowing, all right, by the end of this, there's going to be a maximum of 16 empty tile spaces in this frame. How am I going to start building out my features so that I have the most room to work? I was amazed at how quickly I felt bottlenecked playing Carcassonne the Castle, in that I knew that I really want to make this particular field bigger. I feel like I can probably get some more market icons in there, but I can't place another field tile here because that one road is in the wrong place, and that means that I can't expand this any further.
The other thing I think in this game that you were just talking about, those 16 empty spaces. The other thing that is really important when you're playing this game is that whoever has the largest completed house at the end of the game is going to get extra points for the largest empty space within the frame. So you need to make sure that you're building out your features not only in the way that's going to score you the most points, and in the way that's going to score you the points in the correct order so you can get those bonus tiles, and in a way that's not going to screw you over with road placement. But you need to be building out those features in a way that actually breaks up the room in the frame so that the player with the largest house at the end of the game, if it's not you, doesn't get 16 points. So they get hopefully closer to 4 if you can break it up pretty easily. And that's another thing that you need to think about. I really like the way this game gives you a whole bunch of stuff that you need to be thinking about in what is still basically Carcassonne, so I can explain it to you in 4 minutes.
Yeah. I was really excited. In the very last game we played, I went after my typical strategy of go for a big house so I could put my particular keep icon down on, or meeple on there, so that I knew that I would have those guaranteed points at the end of the game. And I thought I had it going, that I had a nice big empty space that we had just kind of ignored, and then you placed one tile at just the perfect place to cut it in half, cut me down to 6 instead of probably 10 or 12 points, which was a big amount of points. But yeah, I'm amazed at how many different things I had to think about playing Carcassonne the Castle, and I'm even more amazed that it seems like this game is one that you're going to hear me talk about, and maybe if you're lucky you'll find it in a library at Geekway to the West or something. And I guess you can trade for it, and I feel bad.
Not with us, though. We're not trading our copy.
Like, I feel bad saying, like, hey, those are the only ways you can get this game, because I think it's one of the best Carcassonne I've ever played. Honestly, this is the one that I will pull out for 2 players pretty much any time. I want to play this game if I have 2 people and we're interested in playing a 30 to 60 minute Carcassonne game. It plays quick, it's got interesting decisions, it's restrictive in a way that's exciting, and I just... Why aren't we reprinting this game? That's my noise for this.
Good job. Good noise. I agree. This is an excellent Carcassonne game. We very often were playing base Carcassonne with 2 players because it's a game that we both enjoy and it's easy to just pull out. That's not something I anticipate us doing again. We're going to be pulling out the castle if we have just the 2 of us, and it gives you the same thoughtful decisions that you're going to have if you add a couple of the more complicated expansions into the base Carcassonne without needing to pull out all the tiles that go with that and the meeples that go with that and everything that goes with adding a couple of expansions into a game. And it is specifically designed already for those 2-player decisions. I really like it. I really love the art. I love to pull a tile and be like, oh, it's a guy on a hobby horse. That's so cute. I think it's a great thing. The only thing, I guess, as we were talking about this, the only thing I can think that is kind of ugly is the meeples are neutral brown and dark brown. But okay, whatever. Get over that.
Trade out your meeples if you have to. I
guess.
guess.
If you own base Carcassonne, you already have many, many kinds of meeples. And this, we didn't talk about actually, we've talked about in the past the other variants having restricted meeples, where you only have 4 meeples. This is not one of those. You have
6 standard.
Your standard 6 plus the keep meeple that you're going to put onto your largest house once you've completed a house. But you've still got a good number of meeples where you can leave that farmer laying down in the field hoping that you get a couple of markets, and you still have enough meeples that you can work within the confines of the frame to place on a couple of different features. How do you like the farming on this? Because you are a big fan of the farming mechanic in regular Carcassonne, which we've talked about in just about every one of these.
I think that, honestly, this is my favorite outside of base Carcassonne farming. I really love the way farming works in base Carcassonne because that game gets so big and so complex. With the way I prefer to play it with a few expansions, you have a ton of tiles, which allows a lot of maneuvering and a lot of options to kind of vie for control over the big farms. This one, you're restricted not only in the number of meeples you have, but the boundaries and how big those can get. And it really is just this is an option to get chunks of 3 points, and you'll get 3, maybe 4 total markets in a particular field area. I like it. I think it's smooth, and I think it's well scaled to a 2-player version of Carcassonne.
I agree with everything you said about the farming in base Carcassonne, except that's why I hate it. In this game, I found it a lot easier to figure out how many points a person was going to get off of a field and make sure that I was placing my farmer in a place that wasn't going to get sniped at the last minute, because you can't just grow out and around.
Yeah.
If you are placing your farmer at one end of the frame, I can make sure that I make farming on the other end of the frame, and there's absolutely no way you're going to get an open area across the entire length of the frame unless that is the only thing you are placing for, and I think the roads might still cut you off at that point. I think it was a lot easier to keep track of what your farmer was doing, but they still gave you like a worthwhile reward at the end of the game. If you get 12 or 15 points if you're playing really excellently, this is a game where you're scoring around 100 points. So 12 points at the end of the game is a tenth of your score, and that's really going to help. That's more than you're going to get off most of your other features.
All right, well, that is Carcassonne the Castle. Come and play it at one of our board game nights, like Carcassonne the City, because pretty much just going to carry around those Carcassones with us in the future. All right, well, thank you for joining us once again in the CarcaZone. I really like that knob.
Turn the knob off.
I'm going to hang out in this space for a little while.
Bye.
Ooh. All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back with the On Tap. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. Our On Tap game today is also a recent play of ours. It is DropMix, the 2017 release from Hasbro that plays 1 to 5 players for as long as your batteries last, but technically a round is like 10 minutes long. This is designed by the team at Harmonix that brought you Rock Band and Amplitude and a whole bunch of other really crazy awesome rhythm games. You throw cards down onto the board and it mixes the tracks together like a real DJ.
Okay, so before I talk about how you play DropMix, let me tell you what you're going to get when you buy DropMix, because that's a lot of what this is, and it's very unique to this game. First, you're going to get a DropMix board, which is this 2-foot-long piece of plastic which has 5 different RFID readers on it. It also has a spot to plug in your smartphone or a tablet, because this game is app-driven, and it's going to be playing a bunch of music that it reads off the cards, so you're going to need something with which to run the app on. Like I said, there are 5 different pads, and each of them has different colors that correspond to the specific pad. Your first pad is yellow and red, then you've got a red, then you've got a red and blue, then just a blue and green at the end. You are also going to get a whole bunch of cards, and there are 4 full decks in the original box that you're going to buy. Each of these cards has an RFID chip on it that when you place it on one of the game pads, it's going to read the song that it is and the portion of the song that it corresponds to, and it's going to play that through the app. There are 3 different games that you can play with your DropMix set that you're going to buy. You can just play freestyle with it, where you can put any different cards onto any of the pads, and it's going to combine them in a way that actually manipulates the beats per minute and the key a little bit so that they all sort of work together, and you're going to be able to just have fun and goof around with it that way. Nobody wins, nobody loses, everybody has a good party time. There is a competitive mode where you're going to break into teams and you're going to be trying to play cards out and take control of the pads, maybe cover up other players' cards. That's going to give you extra points. And there's a cooperative mode where you're trying to fulfill the requirements that are given to you through the app with the hand of cards that you have for each round, which is going to be limiting in what you can play onto the board. You're trying to get through to the end of 5 rounds. With the competitive and cooperative modes, anytime you play a card, it has to be played onto the correct colored pad, and you need to play a card that is the energy level at least equal to the card that is already on that pad, if not higher. Every card is either level 1, 2, or 3 energy. If you can either beat the other team to 21 points in the competitive mode or fulfill all 5 rounds in the cooperative mode, you are going to win the game. That is how you play DropMix.
Yeah, it's not too terribly complicated in terms of actual game mechanics. The excitement of DropMix is the physical thing itself. You got this nice board, it's got all the light up and all the futuristic stylings you expect from kind of this kind of big budget title. It was a very expensive starter kit, and it's like $100 for the baseboard, and just recently has dropped in price. I got really lucky, and I was able to snag one for $30 at a Best Buy. If you look on Amazon, it's somewhere between $40 and $50 right now.
Yeah, Amazon and Best Buy both put this on sale within about 3 days of each other, which leads me to believe that they may be preparing for the Season 2 that was announced at PAX East.
Yeah.
They may be trying to get this in a lot of people's hands. At $100, I would not buy this game.
Yeah, absolutely. But at $30, I think just the base box $30 was a good bit of fun. It compelled me to get more card packs, which is probably their entire business plan, because, you know, the money's in the software, not the hardware.
Even at like $40, $50, if this is something that you think you're going to get use out of, and it is definitely one of those things where if you think you're going to get use out of it, you're probably going to get use out of it. If you don't think you're going to get use out of it, you probably won't. If you think that you're going to bring this out a bunch, it's a fun thing to play with. I definitely had a good time playing with this game.
Yeah, this is something that we brought out at one of our recent game nights at Good Road, and it was the end of the night thing where we just kind of, all right, let's set this thing up and see what happens. And we found ourselves going through the versus mode and the party mode and just continually playing it. And then you get to the point where in any kind of a fun party game like this, you're just like, well, I just want to throw down cards and see what happens now and see what kind of crazy music we can make. And it's a lot of fun for that. You know, I didn't expect to have so much fun with this thing, and I really feel like if you have like the group of college friends, or if you have groups of, you know, high energy game nights, it's a perfect thing to have for those kinds of settings. And maybe even for like a family kind of thing. I don't know.
I think that a lot of this music is geared towards people who listen to recently released music. I mean, there are certainly some older songs on there. I mean, there's some Jackson 5, there's some Gloria Gaynor, there's Baker Street in one of the packs that we got. There's Beethoven's Fifth, which is definitely not recently released. But a lot of the songs are newer songs. And if you're not a fan of newer sort of indie and rock rap artists, you may not enjoy some of the packs, especially the ones that come with the set.
Mm-hmm. But at the very least, you did get to learn what Jason Derulo is.
I didn't know what he was, and now I do.
I'm really hoping Season 2 continues to bring out some cool, exciting stuff. Harmonix has done really well in the past with kind of highlighting some indie artists in addition to the big-name artists. You know, that's where I learned about Freeze Pop, which is actually a band that was, like, specifically tied to Harmonix. But, like, this particular set has Churches in it. There's some other fun stuff, and I'm never going to turn down more Carly Rae Jepsen cards. I'm really hoping that there's more Carly Rae Jepsen in Season 2.
I will say that I really think the cooperative mode is the best way to play this game, where you're all going against the requirements that are given to you by the app. The scoring on the competitive mode is a little bit wonky. It's one of those things where if you get ahead, you tend to stay ahead. Mm-hmm. I think the freestyle is obviously fun, but it is, in a trope of gaming reviews, not really a game, it's an activity, because you don't get scores and you can't win, so it's not a game. But I think the cooperative mode is actually a game, and it is really fun. Mm-hmm. You do feel the tension where you're like, oh, I don't have anything that we're being asked for. I hope the person across from me has cards that we can play.
Yeah.
Or I'm completely out of cards this hand. I can't be helpful at all. All I feel is tension waiting for other players to play cards until we redraw.
Yeah, the party mode has been a lot of fun, and I really probably... that's the one we're going to be playing with the most. Although I do kind of want to have a kind of DropMix tournament at the Great Big Board Game Day. I think that may be kind of fun, where everybody just signs up and you do a little team battle, and somebody who wins gets, I don't know, a high five or two high fives.
You do get a raw score in the party mode, so you could compete that way.
Also possible. But that is DropMix, and we are putting it on tap today, so here come the list of beers. I've kind of put these in a thematic order, and I'm going to start off with the first one from Microphone Brewing in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. This is Microphone Check 1-2. It's a double dry hopped Imperial IPA, 8.5% ABV. This is double dry hopped with Citra for your juicy, citrusy pleasure. It's ultra hazy. It's available in a 750 milliliter bottle, so you're going to be sharing this with the whole band, pretty much. It's a big bottle, and it is a big beer.
Microphone's release schedule is a little bit erratic, but they called this one of their, quote, staplest, close quote, beers. So you will see this from time to time coming out. I can't say, oh, it releases all the time in spring or it releases all the time in summer, but they do put it out pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Next up, from Hoofhearted Brewing in Marengo, Ohio, there is Ticklin' the Ivories. This is an American IPA. It is 7% ABV. It is super citrusy also, like the one we just talked about, and it is brewed and canned sporadically. This is a rotating availability, and they don't always produce a whole lot of social media buzz when they let it out into the world, but it is very well rated. It's above a 4.0 on a 5-point scale everywhere that I've seen it rated.
Nice.
And it is one of those things that you want to keep your eyes peeled for.
Up next from Odell Brewing Company in Fort Collins, Colorado, we have, drum roll please, drum roll, it's called drum roll.
Oh.
It's an American Pale Ale, 5.3% ABV and 42 IBU, brewed with a rotating hop selection for a juicy, tropical, and hop-forward profile. This is canned regularly. It's probably the most regularly available one on the list here. Odell gets pretty wide distribution, and it's just a good classic American Pale Ale. Nothing wrong with that.
From Kent Falls Brewing in Kent, Connecticut, we have Air Guitar at Work While No One Is Watching. This is an American Pale Ale at 5% ABV. It has a piney and floral front, and it's also got some citrus and berry in there. This has Simcoe and Amarillo hops and is packaged in 16-ounce cans. And it's got a great name.
That is a really good name. So finally, I told you we'd all mix it all together in the end here. From MIA Beer Company in Miami, Florida, we have Mega Mix. It's an American Pale Ale, 5% ABV, West Coast-styled light body pale ale with Mosaic, Galaxy, and Citra hops. Also canned, also regularly available, if you're in Florida at least. I don't know where else they distribute, but I've had it a few times on my trips down to the Panhandle of Florida recently, and it is good. I'm a big fan of MIA Beer Company, and I would like to get more of their beer to me.
So really hop heavy this time, but I think that might have to go with the fact that music is all about what's on the cutting edge, and hops are something you need to consume pretty quickly. So
getting pretty hip on the hops there, huh?
Yeah, trying to
Hip-hop.
put in some meta here for this list.
Hip-hop music. That's my best pun. That's all I got.
It's a pretty good one, yeah.
All right, well, if you would like more information on those beers, you can check out the show notes section at our website. It's draftmechanic.net.
About a year ago, we actually did a full 6-pack review of Near and Far, but we had mentioned at that point that we were going to go through the campaign, and we hadn't come close to finishing yet at that point. And we said we'd come back and we'd talk about how the campaign elements worked when we were done. Well, it took us a year, but we've actually finished it. And we brought Tamra, who is the person that we were playing this game with, in, and we talked about how we felt about the whole campaign. So after the break, we have that coming up for you.
As a Viking leader, I'm used to coming into contact with strange new civilizations, usually right before I raid and pillage the heck out of them, and I'm all about collecting the right tools to overpower and control my adversaries. I like an axe.
Well, that's not exactly what's going on here, Gunnar. In Multi-Universum, you are a member of a team of scientists that was trying to create a time machine, but accidentally opened dozens of portals to new dimensions. That would be all well and good, but there are monsters coming through from the other sides, and you need to close as many portals as you can and fast.
Like I said, ladies, strange new civilizations, axe to the head.
I suppose. Multi-Universum uses a system where, depending on which of your machine's transmitters you're standing at, your cards will provide a different combination of basic actions. In addition, each transmitter has a different open portal, so tools that are perfect for Portal 3 may not work at Portal 5.
Spears work better when I invaded the Faroe Islands.
Every time you close a portal, you get a glimpse into another world, so as a scientist, you'll get rewarded for getting a look at a diverse set of worlds, or several looks into a specific world. And don't forget, these resources aren't free, so efficiency is important too. Check out Multi-Universum at GreyFoxGames.com or at your game store of choice.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Okay, so we are back, and we are going to talk a little bit about our Near and Far campaign, because we have just finished up the full 11-game, 10-game campaign for Near and Far. So we have, in addition to, obviously, myself and Danielle, we have the third party, Tamara. Say hi.
Hello.
And we are going to talk about what we have learned playing 10 games of Near and Far. So I think first thing to talk about, this is, we wanted to do kind of like we do with like Time Stories or something, where we just kind of record our reactions afterwards. But this isn't a spoiler heavy kind of thing. I mean, we don't really have story spoilers to talk about, so you don't have to worry about skipping over this. But what we really wanted to do with this segment is kind of talk about our impressions of the campaign as a whole and how it worked as a campaign that is really kind of light on in terms of holdovers and kind of character building to a point.
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious campaign element in this game was that you gain skills from game board to game board, or from page to page, however you're looking at it. And those skills you're going to retain throughout the entire campaign once you've purchased them. And you gain them by using quest points that you accrue over multiple maps. So maybe I did 2 quests in the first game, and then I did 4 quests in the second game. That's going to mean I have 6 quest points that I can spend on skills, and that's going to essentially equate to 2 skill points that I can use. And once I buy that skill, say I buy like fishing for 1 point or meditating for 3 or whatever, I'm going to have that throughout every further game that I have. That's the main campaigny thing. That's pretty standard.
Mm-hmm. I think we can start by talking about the way that the skill points kind of worked out, because as we've played the last 2 games today, I kind of was looking at all of our different skills, and we chose a good bit of the similar stuff. I know that I think myself and both you, Tamara, bought the meditation skill, which
I bought meditation.
You bought meditation as well?
You guys both had piano playing, yeah.
Yeah, and we bought these skills. We ended up buying the same skills out of the list of 20 skills. Nothing really else seems super exciting to me other than this. The meditation allows you to spend food for hearts, and piano playing, you get a food when you go to the saloon to recruit somebody. Were there any other skills that you saw in there that you wish you had a chance to get now that you have a kind of a look back at the campaign, or anything that like, oh, wish I would have tried this thing out?
One that I kept thinking about was when you go to the mine, you could roll a dice. Mm-hmm. And I believe if it was a 5 or a 6, you would get an extra gem.
Okay. Oh, that's cool.
It's risky, but I thought that was a really neat concept that you're mining and you just happen to get a little bit more than you should have based on the board.
Okay.
You didn't lose anything if you didn't,
You
right?
did not lose anything.
That's nice.
I had a skill that allowed me to fight any of the enemies in the enemy deck when I would have fought a thief or a... Mm-hmm. So it allowed me to essentially assess how strong I was and be like, okay, I know I can get an automatic 5 because I have 5 swords. I'm going to roll a 1 on that die no matter what I roll. So I can fight the 6 straight off. Or, you know, if I have a bunch of extra hearts, I can say, oh, I'm going to fight something stronger and go for more points, hoping that I roll well. It was a useful skill, but I have a feeling that it would probably have been more useful to somebody who went more sword heavy in those late games than I did. I went sort of mediocre sword heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a number of stuff on there that I looked at and I just said, I don't really see a way that I'm ever going to use this. And I like that they're all there, but I just found it interesting that we all kind of specialize towards the same things in this particular one. You know, the ability to get things that would allow you to spend more hearts, basically to get more of a buffer to attack those bigger threats, or hopefully get points on the bigger quests. Is it really all kind of came down? I feel like the one thing that kind of continually came back is that we really, as a team of people, were really rushing for the quests a lot and kind of chose our skills to be able to do that. Did you feel that at all?
I mean, you had way more quests than anybody else.
I guess that's true.
That's your perspective, because you filled out all of the possible quest points you could possibly have.
Right.
I was like 7 or 8 shy of that at the end of the game. And I think you were somewhere in between that, right?
I think I was 4 or 6 shy. I certainly was driven by you guys getting stuff, because I knew if I didn't actually go for a couple at the very beginning, then I might not get anything. So at the beginning, I would really focus on getting a few, and then at the end, I would kind of ease off and try and round out the rest of my strategy, getting my cards purchased and making sure all my little tents were down.
Yeah. I think it makes sense to get the few that are right close to the city at the beginning, because there's sort of a race, because those are going to go in the first couple of rounds.
Right.
But then, as it gets farther in the game, they become more of a, well, I need something to buy my artifacts that I don't really have a way of getting. Maybe I'll go out for a quest, and maybe I'll get that faction banner that I need, or maybe I'll get a bunch of gems if I don't really have another way to get gems. I think in late game, quests are better used to sort of search for things that you can't get than they are to progress your strategy.
Yeah, I definitely would hunt down the quests just for the faction banners more than anything else. I felt like the game was set up pretty well for you to be able to get a gem and coin economy as you start to kind of put camps out there, depending on what people you bring into your party. But the faction banners, if you don't go after those quests, are not really a kind of thing you can get without taking a few extra turns to do some extra coining and trading.
Yeah, and I think that also depends on what artifacts you picked at the beginning. If you picked a bunch that had faction banners on them, then you're going to need to get more banners. Whereas if you took only 1 or 2 that had faction banners, which is really ideally, I wouldn't think you'd want to take more than 2 that had faction banners on them, then you're not going to need those as much.
I managed to get 3 on one of our last 1 or 2 games.
Oh, you fancy.
But I did pay attention to which banner it was, and I got ones that were cheaper. I almost never took a blue banner card.
Oh, okay.
Because I knew it would be really hard for me to get, especially considering I was the mean robot. So the blue was always the harder thing to achieve. So I just went for the easier of the banners when I was getting them.
Okay.
You just sort of started a conversation on the other aspect of a campaign, which is something I was hoping that we'd get to, which is that you were the mean robot.
Mm-hmm.
Greer is, by his nature, this is the robot's name, not a mean robot. He doesn't have to be a mean robot.
A robot.
He actually looks kind of sad on his card, or maybe
does.
worried.
He's worried about the harm that's going to come to you if you cross the robot.
Yeah, but early on, you had just, because of, I guess, the way it turned out, you had taken a bunch of negative consequence stuff or low reputation artifacts, so he became the mean robot. And throughout the rest of our campaign, he was the mean robot, and that was fun. Whereas Jake and I, we were Shardling and Kiku. I just actually had to look up the name of my character because I didn't remember. Lady in Green.
With book.
With book. But our characters weren't anywhere near as developed as that, I would say.
Right. I mean, I think that the strength of that also comes from the game's characters are kind of geared towards the character mode rather than the campaign mode. But Tamara, of course, went above and beyond, coming up with a really fun character for the robot there.
And it was cool to even go forward with that when I had a quest.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have necessarily... I always chose the mean robot thing to do. And that was actually really fun. Even if it was harder or easier, it didn't really matter. That was just what my character was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the mean thing actually ended up being the nice thing because you only perceive so much when you're given the quest options. So that was really interesting to see things turn around when you actually got the resolve on it.
Yeah, that was something that I was thinking about, and we kind of talked about a little bit before we came up to the recording here. I was surprised that A, the writing stayed consistently strong on the little quests all the way through, and B, that they continued to kind of subvert your expectations every now and then to give you an outcome that you really didn't expect on one of those quests, especially as you got into one in the very last map. The option that looked like it would obviously be the evil option turned out to be actually you're doing a good thing here. And I really enjoyed that in this world, that he really... Ryan Lockett really set out to design this world and then work with his writers to make it a place where you're never really sure what your actions are going to result in, most of the time.
The one thing that was sort of consistent, though, was that when you made decisions in a quest, if you made sort of the same style of decisions, I think that played into the keyword system.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had gotten the red keyword fairly early on, and I won't get into what that does or what that leads you to, but you kept making decisions that were sort of in the same vein, and that allowed you to progress down that path. Whereas if you had been, making decisions based on the characters that you had drafted in that game and trying to min-max your quest choices, you probably wouldn't have gone down that particular story path nearly as thoroughly.
Right. And that was fun that there were a few story paths. You weren't railroaded into them, but you kind of sidelined for a little bit, and then you went back into just normal different stories.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of sidelining and side quests, we hadn't seen, and I guess in the last 4 games, nobody came up across a quest that resulted in getting a side quest, which was, one mechanic that you have in this game is that sometimes when you go to a quest, it will give you a side quest that you write down in your character card. The next time that you go on a specific quest space, rather than reading that specific quest space, you'd go on your own special side quest space. And I feel like we had those just kind of in the second quarter of the game, maybe in the third quarter, the middle of the game. And I'm wondering if that was intentional by design, just to keep you kind of excited and interested during that middle part before, the story wraps up in the final map of the campaign.
I would think so. I mean, if you were putting side quests in the next to last game, I feel like that would have taken away from the story that they were trying to tell with the final map.
Yeah.
And there is certainly, at least from my reading of it, there is certainly a moral of the campaign. There is something you are supposed to get from what they're telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they had you, running off on some kind of side quest about helping someone out of a log or something in the next to last campaign, I think it would have perhaps diluted that story that they were pulling you towards. Whereas in the second quarter, as you were saying, of the story, you weren't really as knowledgeable about what was going on, and you weren't really as invested in following this one main storyline, so they could send you off on side quests, and it didn't really matter if you missed main story points.
And I appreciated that in those story points, we got tidbits. We still don't know every single thing that these main characters have done.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, thematic for adventurers. You know, you're going to hear stories here and there, but you aren't going to know the whole story.
Yeah. I guess another thing to ask is, did you feel satisfied with the way that the story developed and carried on through the 10 maps? Did it feel like you were learning more constantly? Or did it feel like it was you would run into a lot of disconnected stuff? How did that carry through for you guys?
I certainly felt more like it was better at creating a touch point than I expected, because if you look at when this game came out, and you look at when this is releasing, you will note it took us several months to complete our campaign.
Yeah.
It was enough thematically connected so that when we came back to it and we got those quests, I would be like, oh, that's right, we had fought this person and they were trying to further this particular plot point, and they're doing that because this had happened, and it touched back enough on that main theme that I was reminded, but it didn't feel entirely focused on that. Like, people would tell you about something that was related to the main theme, but then you'd go on and do whatever their daily life thing was, because that's what they're doing. They live their own stuff.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the way that the campaign progressed in terms of telling an overarching story without being too deep into the minutiae. Minutia?
Minutia.
How do I word that word? Anyway,
Details.
I really appreciated that it kept the game at a level where you could have scenes of an interesting story, but not have to spend 3 hours per game to get the whole of everything you needed to get. It didn't force you to put your head so far into this that you would be completely out of it in details by the next time you played. I do really appreciate that, and I think having a lighter campaign in this really helped the feel of the game.
And it still did escalate.
Yeah.
Throughout each map, you did notice the escalation of that story. Even if it had been a month or 2 months since we had last played, it was there.
Another thing that is important to talk about with a game like this, any kind of campaign game, you have character progression. We talked about skills, we talked about side quests. Did you feel that the game stayed balanced throughout? Because a campaign game can very much have somebody get way out ahead because of whatever crazy skills they've developed. And this one is a lot more skills light, or at least character development light is what I mean. What do you think?
I mean, since we took a lot of the same skills, I think it certainly stayed balanced, other than the fact that some of us are worse at it than others, which is just, that's my fault. I'm not as good at this game as you guys are, which is fine. Like, I think the characters themselves started on even footing every game, and since every game was essentially a self-contained little experience, I think that's probably better. If you played 2 games and then one character was so much stronger than everybody else, and they were trying to make that up, I feel like it wouldn't necessarily make you want to progress through and discover all that story, especially since at the beginning, the story is a little bit more scattershot. You're just discovering the world, and there is some thematic ties to everything that you're doing, but you're also doing a bunch of wonky little quests and side quests and whatever. I think the fact that you all start on relatively even footing means that you're going to continue playing those games thinking that you have a chance to continue doing well, which you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it definitely, at the beginning, a few decisions will kind of show how the round that game is going to go for you. Because if you can get a couple really good people on your team, that helps progress your going through the map and succeeding really well.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of strength in the fact that your adventuring party reset at every game, which is something that I feel like seems strange to people the first few times they play through this. They think, oh, I'm playing a campaign. I should be able to level up my party and keep them with me. But it really serves as an important balancing mechanic for the game as a whole, that you can't have the floating orb guy from game 2 on just constantly in your party.
I think if that were the case, they would have had to have found some way to eliminate the randomness of that draw pool. I mean, you can spend a food to wipe the draw pool, but if somebody were just to get a really, really strong character. And I do want to say, there are some characters that seem stronger for their value than others.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
The character that is supposed to be Ryan Lockett is a very strong character for the cost, which I think is only like 3 gold to hire them. Whereas some of the other ones that are like 3 or 4 gold that give you 1 or 2 icons, or maybe isn't something that is as valuable to get points, maybe they facilitate going through the game more easily. If you retained everybody in every campaign, then somebody could end up with a really strong party just by the luck of the draw. And I think that would make it less fun going forward.
Speaking of going forward, we just had the Amber Mines expansion for Near and Far drop on our doorstep last week. So we've looked into the box a little bit, poked around in there. There's a bunch of different modules with different new things you can add in. There's a magic module, there's some advanced adventurers. You've got obviously the Amber Mines, which is the big deal. What are you most interested to do moving forward with Amber Mines? There's 2 separate scenarios that are just a 1-game scenario that you play and you go through some new story there. There's apparently a cooperative mode where you're going against the Red King, and of course you can just kind of lump these things into any other particular modes in the game. What are you most interested to look at in the future?
I want to destroy the Red King.
But the Red King is my friend.
I'm aware, but you killed him.
I did. I'm really interested to see what they do with the Red King and with the co-op, because it has been we've all been against each other, and with this really strong character, I think that's thematic that they would get a party together.
I'm also just excited to see that they are reutilizing some of the pages in the initial book with new story bits. So one of the things that I know we probably had talked about when we talked about this the first time is you have these 10 maps. Are they going to put out new map pages? Are they going to create new books? And it looks like, at least in this one, they've created sort of a new book supplement that reuses maps that you already have. So you're not going to have to get new maps, but they are producing new story content, which is exciting, because I thought maybe they would just, put out some more one-off stuff or another set of character stories for the new characters, but they are continuing to have that full campaign style story come out in the expansions.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting way to reutilize the world, because it makes sense that once you get through the main campaign and you've done whatever you did in the final map and beaten big bosses and such, that you would eventually go back to some places you were before. And I like the thought of going back to a map that we've been to before and there's an event going on. This is not any kind of spoiler really for Amber Mines, but one of them is there's an election going on in one of the worlds, and then the other one is something to do with some Glogos that are trying to rebuild something. I didn't remember what I read a few minutes ago, but something along those lines. And I do like seeing that reuse, not just for being able to do something with this book that we've had and used, but it also is nice that they're not just going to continue to print tons and tons and tons of extra maps that just get used once and sit on a shelf.
Well, it also makes the world feel more self-contained. Like, you've done this task that you were sent out to do, but now you still exist in the same world. You're not going to another planet or something. You're going back to that town that you were in 2 towns ago, and you're gonna see what's going on there.
And it's the story that makes those places interesting. So the map being the same isn't going to be boring. It's the stories that we're going to be going after anyway.
Do you have any interest in going back and playing the original campaign specifically to get different story beats? Because for each of those maps, there was probably 6 or 7 story locations that we never even used, some quests that we didn't even touch.
I'm curious, but I know we didn't write down what we
did.
What we marked.
Yeah.
So it would be hard to ensure that we were getting new stuff.
Then that's our fault. It tells you to mark the stuff that you used. We didn't, largely in case we started running the campaign with a different group.
Yeah.
And I would play through it again with a different group, but I wouldn't necessarily play through it again for the story beats, because, again, we don't know what we did, and I'm fairly sure there aren't enough story beats to have new ones on all of the points. But I would certainly go through it again, knowing that there are going to be things that I haven't discovered. And there's no, giant secret that you discover halfway through the game and you're like, oh, everything is different now.
Yeah.
But I would be interested to get the points that I didn't already see.
Yeah, at the very least, it'll require us to put story beats on the named places first, so those will always be in every campaign of the game. But I do like that, it could be the kind of thing that a few years down the road we come back and play this campaign again, maybe take a different character, not that it's going to change anything in this particular mode, but at the very least, give us a chance to make some new stories out of that. Honestly, I'm interested to play the character mode more than anything else right now. As, somebody who played with the Shardling character and didn't actually really do any world building with that character myself, I kind of want to see what he had planned for that particular character and what that story that the Red Raven Games team built for each of the characters is. So that might be the kind of thing that we attack. I think you have to get 2 or 3 maps to get the full character story out of each of those. So that might be an option for us as well, but I'm really interested to see what's in this Amber Mines box, and I think the thing that I'm most excited about, beyond obviously the playing of the content, is the fact that there's a number 1 on the side of the box, and that they are specifically saying that this is the first of several expansions for Near and Far, which to me is kind of the culmination of what Ryan Lockett has done with his games so far. He did Above and Below, and it had very interesting story that wasn't connected in any way and didn't kind of work together as a bigger story. You just kind of got a feel for the world, and the mechanics in that were restrictive, to say the least, punishing. And then I feel like, at least I personally, really enjoyed Islebound mechanically. I thought that game was a joy to play, so much fun to swashbuckle around.
But it had no story.
It had no story whatsoever. I'm actually kind of wondering if we're going to revisit that the world of Islebound sometime in a further Near and Far expansion. Hopefully that's something that happens.
We'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we've wrapped up the campaign here, do you have any final thoughts on Near and Far after 10 campaign games and other games we've played?
I think my biggest takeaway is that in Game 10, I was still excited to play. Mm-hmm. I wasn't just trying to rush through and get the campaign finished. And that says something for the game. It is a good game. It's not a super strong campaign. It's sort of gentle on the campaign elements. But it's a fun game, and it has really interesting story. And I think that makes it worth investing in and worth playing if you've got a group that can sit down and commit to those 10 games.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked the stories. Every time that we got to a new one, which was several times in the game, it was always really cool to hear you guys read the stories and actually see them played out. And I don't think that is going to get boring if they keep the writing as well in this one as moving forward.
Cool. Well, I've said my piece. I really enjoy Near and Far. I think it's a culmination of what Ryan Lockett has done, and I said that a few minutes ago. So that's kind of what I've got to bring to the table for this one.
I think it certainly says something. Jake and I just redid our top games of 2017 in the last episode, and I think it certainly says something that still being involved in that Near and Far campaign, we both still had that in the top 3 that we had. And this is a game that I'm going to want to keep playing.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Indeed.
And time to go to another bump. Here it is, the bump music.
Your draftmechanic.net is ready to install. Save your work and leave your PC plugged in and turned on.
Today, in the beer segment section of the show, Danielle has decided to talk about gluten-free beer.
Yeah, we were at the store the other day and we noticed that one of the breweries that we really love around here, Full Steam Brewery, had released a gluten-free beer that was available at Target, of all places. And I started thinking about gluten-free beer and I realized it wasn't something we had really talked about. And I didn't really know. I knew that you can brew beer with things that didn't have gluten in them, but I know there's also another type of beer that we're going to talk about in a minute that I wasn't really well informed on, and I figured you guys might not have been either. So let's start with what gluten is. It is a substance that is present in cereal grains, which include wheat and barley, and it is a mixture of proteins that is generally present in varying quantities in traditional beer. So the most is in wit beers, because you're obviously putting a huge amount of grain. I think we talked about Hefeweizens being at least 50% wheat in their malt bill, and so you're going to be getting a lot of gluten in something like that, whereas what was described in the article that I was reading as commercial lagers brewed partially with rice have less gluten in them. So yay, big garbage AB InBev beers, you have less gluten in them. Good for you, I guess?
You did this one.
Yay. Well, gluten can be a problem for some people. People with celiac disease really can't have it. It does a number on their bodies, and it is very dangerous. Whereas there are a lot of people who just have general gluten intolerance or want to remove gluten from their diet for any number of reasons, which I'm not going to comment on whether those are correct or not. That is up to you. You make your life choices. But there are a lot of people who are looking to remove gluten from their diet, and that number has grown appreciably in the last several years, according to market research. Gluten-free beers can be created in two ways. You can brew with non-gluten containing ingredients, like I said earlier. So instead of wheat or barley, you could be using millet or rice or sorghum or buckwheat or corn. I think the one that we had said we saw from Full Steam was a sorghum beer. And there are any number of combinations in any number of beers that you can do to brew a gluten-free beer from gluten-free ingredients. There is also something called a gluten-reduced beer, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Most cider is also gluten-free, but some cideries do use gluten-containing ingredients like barley for flavor or for enzymes. So if you are at a cidery and you have celiacs or you have an intense gluten intolerance, you might want to just double-check, make sure they don't use barley in any kind of their flavoring. The international guideline for what can be called gluten-free is that it has less than 20 parts per million of gluten. But the U.S. Food and Drug Administration actually says a gluten-free beer needs to be made with ingredients that don't contain gluten. So they have created this gluten-reduced category, which is beers that actually have less than 20 parts per million of gluten, but they're brewed initially with ingredients that do contain gluten. But it's just that by the time they get to consumers, they're below that threshold. Now, I was wondering, how do you get the gluten out of these gluten-reduced beers? That's the thing that I said I wasn't particularly knowledgeable about. So I looked into it, and the way that most brewers that produce gluten-reduced beers do so is they add something called brewer's Clarex or Clarity Firm. This is an enzyme that is derived from Aspergillus niger, which is the black mold that you can actually find growing between the layers of an onion. If you've ever done a lot of cooking with it, it's so many things come from mold that...
Okay.
Get over it.
I'm over it.
I mean, it makes sense because molds live off other things, and here you're going to have this mold sort of ridding the beer of that gluten. So they produce this enzyme from the Aspergillus niger, and it was originally used to reduce something called chill haze, which is a colloidal haze that forms when proteins in the malt form a loose bond with the polyphenols from the hop. So you get this when the beer is cold, and it just looks a little bit hazy. Normally, this goes away when the beer warms up a little bit, but with extended cold storage, which is how you're supposed to store beer if it's, not being drank right away, this becomes a permanent haze. So they had originally created this enzyme to put into beer to get rid of this chill haze. It was discovered, though, that when it was added during the fermentation, it lowers the gluten of the beer to that less than 20 parts per million threshold, which is good if you want that kind of thing. If you're looking to reduce the amount of gluten in your beer, but you don't want to brew with gluten-free ingredients, particularly if you have an aversion to brewing with something like rice, which you might understand why you would. So this is a way that you can produce a gluten-reduced beer, and these are a lot more available in the market from both big brewers and from craft brewers alike. There is a little bit of a disagreement in the gluten-sensitive community as to whether gluten-reduced beers can actually lead to a little bit of reaction in people. There is not, as far as I could see, a consensus on that. If you are extremely gluten-sensitive, you may want to stick with ingredients that are gluten-free from the initial brewing, whereas if you have a lighter gluten sensitivity, gluten-reduced beer should actually be fine. But by the time they get to you, they are all below that gluten-free labeling threshold for the international community, so as long as you don't have a severe sensitivity, you should be okay. Obviously, I am not a doctor. Consult your doctor, blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to me if you have health issues. One final thing I do want to say is that if you are at a bar or a brewery that doesn't maintain really good health sanitation, there is a possibility that your gluten-free beer is contaminated if there's not adequate line cleaning being done between kegs. So if you are very sensitive to gluten or even moderately sensitive to gluten, you want to make sure that you're visiting bars and establishments of any kind that really do practice good line cleaning, that's just going to save you a bunch of trouble on all regards. So, line cleaning, it's very important. That's the final takeaway point. But that is what I have to say about gluten-free beer. I'm not going to say whether you should drink them or not, but if you are going to drink them, you have two different kinds of beers, and that is how they both come to be.
Knowledge is important, and now you have some of it. Danielle, thank you for another informative beer segment.
I try.
And now it is time for us to move on to the final round. Oh, hold on. The final round. Can I do that for this one too? Yeah.
I mean, it technically comes from the CarcaZone segment, so probably.
Okay, I'll turn it back down. Anyway, in the final round, we ask our Slack channel their thoughts on a specific topic. And if you would like to join a future final round, you can always go to draftmechanic.net/Slack and sign up for free and talk with us about board games and craft beer and all those things and plenty of other things, and occasionally somebody will make puns. But anyway, on this particular final round, we have a topic, and this is it. In these last few days before the Gen Con hype rocket ignites, it's time to look back. We're obviously deep in the... Oh, hold on. The CarcaZone! But what's a classic game or game series that you think doesn't get enough love? Danielle, you want to start us out?
Sure. Paul Imogen said Dungeon Twister. Unfairly maligned for being a luckless two-player brain burner, especially in this day and age of heavy game worship. To be fair, the gender presentation could have been less... cheesecake? His words, not mine. I'm actually unfamiliar with the art in this one.
Yeah, I've never really looked into this game in the past, but I do like a luckless two-player brain burner, so maybe I will at some point check out Dungeon Twister. Megan Naxer jumped in and said, how about the GIF series of abstract games? All of the games in the series are 10 plus years old, except for Link, and the ones I have played, they're excellent. Sure, two-player abstract games aren't for everyone, but these are beautiful games with elegant designs. And those Oreo Bakelite pieces the series is known for are wonderful. I then asked Megan where I should start in this series, and she said, not Link. It is the one that I started with, since it is the most recent one, but it is a culmination of the previous titles. I haven't played GIF or Zerts, so I can't speak to those two, but I think Devon or Yinch would be a good starting place. Devon is probably a little easier to learn and plays a little faster than Yinch. After those two would probably be Tzar. Punkt is really good, but might be slightly harder to learn. Link is also brilliant, but slightly more rules-heavy. Now, this series of games sounded like a whole bunch of gibberish letters, and that's because, frankly, they are. So GIPF is the name of the series, and the ones that Megan recommended as starting are Devon, DVONN, and Yinch, YINSH.
The last one's like the most easily spelled one, I think, of all the group of them.
And you get the word like Link, it's LYNGK.
Of course.
That is a word.
Patrick Hillier said, I'm still a fan of the Crayon Rail games, i.e. Empire Builder, Lunar Rails, etc. They reprinted Iron Dragon last year to little fanfare, and with the demise of Mayfair, I think they will be lost to history.
Bert Pike said, the Cosmos two-player line of games is fun and usually not talked about. There are quite a few games in this series. A few I really like include Kahuna, Tally-Ho, and Perry Rodan, The Cosmic League. Perry Rodan is a like pick-up and deliver game and has been called a very light version of Merchant of Venus. Megan chimed in on this one. I love the Cosmos two-player line. I think Targi is probably my favorite. I would honestly agree with that. I adore Targi. That is a great game. I'm wondering if we're ever going to get that expansion here in the States. Maybe in the next year or two.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Will Foy said, I remember playing a variant of Mealborn on my handspring visor. Lol, I'm old. It was an okay electronic game, but never seemed terribly fun in Meat Space. I wonder if Rob Davio could pry that one from whoever has the license and make that one restored. I also miss the old days of trivia games, again betraying my age, like Trivial Pursuit. I wonder if there's good stuff to be mined there, perhaps with an app subscription to make it more fun and keep it fresh.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Mealborn is, it was Parker Brothers, and so that is Hasbro now, I believe. Mm-hmm. So good luck with that one.
I played a lot of Mealborn growing up. That was the game
Me
that
too.
Me and my dad played a lot of. And we did learn, if you ever played with 4 players, the rules are different. Be aware. You cannot play a 4-player of this game just thinking that everybody does the same ordinary
Yeah, it doesn't work
thing.
that way.
And then finally, Dennis Hoyle reminded us that Kalis exists, and everybody jumped in on this one. Megan Naxer says, I still haven't had the chance to play Kalis in person, even though I've always wanted to. I've played the app, but it's not the same. Nate Bivens said, it's foundational to worker placement games, and really opened the Euro design space at the time. Still holds up after all these years as well, and if it came out now, it would still be a hit. if it had 3D walls. I said it would be good if they also had a 3D miniature of the Provost that moves back and forth on where you can build, and also, even more so, if that Provost was then Cthulhu. Dave Foncanel said, I concur on all the Kalis mentions. I think it's sometimes dismissed as simply an influential classic, but it absolutely holds up. It's obviously served as an inspiration to many other games, but that doesn't necessarily make the new games better. I've played Kalis on the app a decent bit, and I enjoyed it. I wouldn't mind playing an actual real game of that with real people. We had one final word from Patrick Hillier.
He says, let's have a calibration!
I would be down with a calibration. So, if you have a copy of Kalis and you would like to play it at a convention, shoot us a line. I mean, maybe we'll have time to do the thing. Danielle, that's the end of this episode, and I'm a little terrified because our next episode is the Gen Con hype list, and that means that the time is upon us to think too much about Gen Con. Are you prepared? Are you mentally prepared for this?
No.
Good, you have 2 weeks.
One step at a time. Let's finish this episode first, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much to everybody, again, for listening to this episode of Draft Mechanic. If you're looking for us on the internet, draftmechanic.net, at Draft Mechanic, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media, draftmechanic@gmail.com if you would like to go there. We have a Slack channel, draftmechanic.net/Slack is where you go for that.
We are also on Board Game Geek. We are guild number 2470, so drop us a line there. That is where you can also get the Geek Gold for that micro badge if you are looking for it.
Draft Mechanic t-shirts are now available. You can get them at redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic. And if you do, send us a line, send us a picture of you wearing your cool new Draft Mechanic t-shirt. If you order this in the next few days, you might have it before Gen Con. And if you're wearing a Draft Mechanic t-shirt at Gen Con and you see me, I'll be the one wearing the Draft Mechanic t-shirt, you'll get a high five.
I mean, I'm also going to be wearing a Draft Mechanic t-shirt, but if they can't tell us apart at this point... If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, our next gaming night, like we said earlier, is on July 17th at Salud Cerveceria. We'd love to see you there.
Finally, Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. Visit grayfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. All right. I think we did it. Cool. Episode 79. It's done. I feel like am I forgetting something?
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly. And tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Down with that. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 79 was recorded on Sunday, July 15th, 2018 in front of a live studio cat. Oh, he's so cute sleeping there.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter.
Hi, this is Eric Buscemi, popping in to let you know about a continuing interview series I've been doing on the Punchboard Media website called In Focus, Perspectives in Board Gaming. I've been interviewing people that work in all different facets of the board game industry, such as designers Nikki Valens and Daniel Salas, artists Fernanda Suarez and Beth Sobel, board game publishers Anne-Marie DeWitt and Shari Spiro, and many other people with unique industry perspectives. Check out our interviews on the Punchboard Media website, www.punchboardmedia.com, where a new one is posted every Wednesday afternoon.
Punchboard Media,
where we all
bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.